and welcome to a special podcast episode in which we pay tribute to our colleague, mentor and good friend Darren Robson, who sadly passed away earlier this year at the age of 50. We want to take a moment to extend our condolences and best thoughts to Darren's family and close friends who are grieving his loss, and we share our gratitude for having met Darren while appreciating his impact on us personally and professionally. It is worth noting that this is not an AC-wide tribute. It is mostly based on Darren's contributions to the work of the digital learning and podcast teams. Therefore, we added links to the Kudo board that the AC created, titled In the Loving Memory of Darren Robson, and the recent Coaching Perspectives article titled Remembering Darren Robson, both sharing stories and kind words from colleagues and friends in the coaching community and across the MOE community. Today I'm here with my colleagues Rob Lawrence and Maxine Bell, who will share also how they met Darren and in which way he impacted their lives, professionally and personally. Hello, Maxine. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Smiranda.
Hi, Smiranda.
For those of you who didn't know Darren, here's a short introduction to him. And this is a quote from an article in the Coaching at Work magazine, issued in April 2015. The full article will also be available with all the episode resources if you'd like to look into it. Maxine will do the honors of reading that quote for us.
Darren Robson is a director on the global board of the Association for Coaching, chief storyteller and fire starter at charity MOE Foundation, and founder of a hugely successful coaching practice, coaching CEOs, entrepreneurs and top teams from leading companies such as TalkTalk, Channel 4, Network Rail, Save the Children and Warner Brothers. He considers himself a very lucky man. It has given me a wonderful lifestyle. A little luck and lots of hard work have certainly played an important part in Robson's life, but it wasn't always like that. In fact, his beginnings were hardly auspicious. He grew up on a tough council estate in Kent, with very little money and even less interest in school. But the one thing he did have was drive.
And with that drive and his revolutionary spirit, Darren had a journey like no other, living with the determination to make the world a better place. Whatever help he received on his journey, he made sure to pay it forward time and again. And coaching opened up an excellent way for understanding and helping others.
My vision is for every child to learn about themselves, to grow up knowing they are loved and can love themselves, to understand the coaching philosophy and approach.
This is what Darren shared in the article mentioned above when speaking about the charity he founded, the Ministry of Entrepreneurship, MOE Foundation. In this episode, you will hear from Darren himself, actually, through clips from other podcasts that he participated in, namely our 100th episode released in August 2022, a podcast in which we brought the team together to celebrate having reached our 100th episode, as the title says, and spend some time reflecting upon our accomplishments and sharing our vision for the future together. You'll also hear from Darren host an episode titled Reflections After the First Year of AC Podcasts, a podcast released in January 2021, where Darren was in conversation with George Warren, Alex Morgan, Sue Stockdale, and Rob Lawrence, who are the hosts of our 5 first podcast series. Now with Rob and Maxine, we'll comment on the chosen clips and we'll share more Darren stories and our insights with you in this special episode. The clips that you will listen to are brilliant reminders of Darren's passion for AC and the coaching profession, his vision for the future, and his ongoing dedication to serve the community, to grow and constantly learn and evolve. Now here's Darren introducing himself, a beautiful piece in his own words.
Yeah, hello all. I'm Darren Robson. So I'm part. I've been with the AC since March 2003. There you go. Look at that. Hasn't that a long time? March 2003 was when I initially got involved in the team. So I'm part of the global board and I'm part of the AC founding team. And it's a real privilege and to be on the call here today and also to be back with the team that have helped to create this podcast. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this jam session goes.
What I noticed in the introduction of himself there really was his modesty. And that was Darren all over, really. Yeah, he never saw himself as a one-man band doing everything. He always saw everything as a teamwork, as collaboration, and he worked hard to create that within teams. So that's what struck me in his introduction there. So, Smiranda, how long did you know Darren and how did you get to know him?
Oh, wow. Well, We met in 2014, just about when I started working with the AC, and I was organizing this international conference that we held in Budapest. So it was great because we met face to face as well in our virtual environment. That's a big thing in Budapest. And I was still in the context of getting to know the entire team. And I can say that Darren was the quiet one. So he was there in the back, taking photos, networking, but mildly being kind of observing. That was his style in a face-to-face context, and being involved from the backstage in a sense, but aware of everything that was happening. And I can't say that we even interacted much back then, but it was always a positive experience, positive impression. And then we kicked it off much later, actually, in my journey in the AC, when we started. I started working on the webinars and putting together this program, and Darren became somehow my biggest advocate, whereas we were not that much connected even at the time. He just liked the idea. He liked the idea that we would do something around digital learning. We were not even calling it that at the time. And he had a vision that matched with what I was proposing, and it just brought everything that I was doing to a much higher level, which is what Darren did. He would have conversations with people and bring the best out of them, and then all of that would just amplify to a something that you haven't even thought of in the first place, that it could be something bigger, more exciting, more impactful in so many ways. I'm smiling now as I'm saying this, because it just brings up all the different conversations that we've had in the very beginnings of our digital learning and then podcast journey. We worked a lot over the years, had hundreds of conversations in all kinds of situations in our virtual life. I remember speaking to Darren while I was biking, or while he was fishing, or preparing the meals for kids, or other things like this. So there were not just the official meetings, but there were loads and loads of conversations and brainstorming, and kind of how can we do things in a better way, and what we are learning from the things that we've done, with the idea that you just have an idea and then you get on with it and you put it out there, and then we'll see how people react to it, and then we learn from it, and then we improve, and then we're just going to do it even better afterwards. And that's kind of how we did things with this, and with Darren's support. So that was always valuable.
You became good friends with him, didn't you, really? It wasn't just a work relationship.
Yes, I mean, Darren, for me, he's been a brilliant colleague and supporter of everything that we've done over the years, but also mentor and a friend in so many ways. For me, I can say that I've been working, like being in the workspace for about 20 years now, and I don't think I've ever met anyone like Darren, who, I've had loads of colleagues and supervisors and bosses and team members and that, but somebody who would have that type of impact on me in terms of just offering the space for me to grow professionally, and for the ideas to expand, and for things to become reality, for us to implement things, to actually take those ideas and bring them to life, have them implemented, bring them to reality. That's the hard step. That's where Darren was great at, just saying, okay, we just go with it. We just do it. Yeah, we will. I mean, that kind of support, that kind of energy, the optimism behind it would just give me and the rest of the team the confidence that, we're just going to do this and it's going to work. And, if it doesn't, then we'll learn from it and we'll just do it better next time. And it's why we are where we are. I mean, it's why we are doing so many things. And in so many ways, that just kind of lives through, because for me, having had his support is, without thinking about it's what I'm doing now. We're just saying, okay, what are we going to do? Any idea that just we pick up on it and then we just go with it. We just implement it. And that's how everything happens. Besides this, there was you asked about the friend part, and Darren he's a person you can look up to in so many ways. He was very involved with his family, very involved with the kids. He spent a lot of time with the girls. I have my small kids, so we'll talk about family, we'll talk about kids, we'll talk about the importance of being there, the work-life balance, how much we're working. I tend to be a little bit of a workaholic if I'm getting into if I have the project, if I have something that I'm getting into it, then I kind of lose myself into it. I forget about the rest. That aspect of life was always something that we could connect on as well, because he would make the point that you need to step away, and family is really important and kids are really important, and they grow so fast, and you just need to give them the attention when they need it and while they're small, and you're not going to take back those moments. So that was always something super valuable for me personally as well. He'd call my son Fireman Sam, because there was a time in during the pandemic when in lockdown, and we were sharing photos of what the kids are doing, because there were hard times, yes, with everyone in lockdown, and we were fortunate because we had a big garden, so our small kid could play there, and he was watering the grass, and he was watching a lot of Fireman Sam at the time, so he was putting down fires everywhere, and Darren was laughing at this, and we were, he was sharing what the girls are doing, and there were a lot of moments that we've shared from a personal point of view as well, with those values in mind.
And I think just thinking about what you just said there, I think one of Darren's talents, I guess, was that he often, I think, saw things in us before we saw them in ourselves. And that's where that confidence comes. So he saw something in you. That's why he was backing you. That's my feeling, because that was my experience with him. I met him in 2018 when I did the coach training with MOE. And I went to MOE because it worked with young people, and that was an area of interest of mine. And I like the simplicity and the transparency of them. And obviously in the training, he came in and said hi and talked a bit about himself. But it wasn't until 2020 or maybe 2019 that he approached me out of the blue. Yeah, it was about 18 months after I'd done the training. He had been seeing some posts of mine on social media and found them interesting and was curious. And so he did his thing, which he did with a lot of people, where he wanted to have a call with me, and he just said, right, talk. I'm sure you know what I mean. And he would just sit and listen. I'd never had that experience before, where someone would just sit and listen for so long and be scribbling down notes and then feed back. And what he fed back to me about what he saw in me, I don't think anyone had ever said anything like what he said, and that still moves me to today. And then he sent me an image of his notes that he scribbled, and they weren't in like straight lines, they were sort of scribbled and things circled, and that's how he wrote things down. And then that's from there how I sort of inadvertently got involved with the AC, because I think he spoke, I don't know if he did, Miranda, but I maybe spoke to you about me or recommended, I don't know what happened in the background, but when I approached to host the creative coaching and then got offered this job that I'm doing now, I know that's Darren, and he was an invisible hand for many people, and he supported me in lots of ways that have really helped me step forward. And I think he had a lot more belief in me than I've had. So yeah, it was very, very precious, very special the way he did that, just his presence. And he is very modest. I can imagine him at that meeting kind of sitting back, just watching people, which is something I do quite a lot as well. So it's quite funny. So I didn't know him in a friend way as well as you did, but he did put me in a group with some other wonderful creatives to try and encourage that creative side of me, which is something I'm focusing on now. So I do wonder, if he hadn't had that conversation with me, would I be doing what I'm doing now? Would I be trying to start a creative business of? Maybe, but just having someone see those things made all the difference. And I know that I'm one of thousands and thousands of people that he's done that with. So he definitely had that special quality and that ability to see. So Rob, what about your journey with Darren?
Yes, fascinating to hear your backstory, Smiranda, and yours too, Maxine, because it evokes so many different themes for me that are apparent about Darren and my own experiences with him from the early days. And I'm trying to remember exactly when it was that I met him. I remember the meeting of him, but I can't remember specifically when it was. And it's got to be at least 5 or 6 years ago now, so beyond 2018. But I remember not having been a member of the AC very long and happened to be passing through London, and there was an AC event in London. And curiously, it was Kim Arnold, a mutual friend of ours. It was a workshop with her. And I think in sort of almost classic sort of Darren fashion, I wouldn't have known who he was or what he was doing, because he was behind a camera, just sort of behind the scenes almost at the side, just capturing elements of the event. I don't know if he was taking pictures or actually filming it. But I could tell he had a sort of, he knew a lot of people and he had a bit of a rapport, but you'd only see that around the edges in the breaks and stuff, just to get a sense of like how far Darren's net sort of spread. I got chatting to the chap who I was sat next to, who I'd never met before. We were just chatting and he was asking about what I did and I was asking about what he did and our involvement with the AC, and I explained I was new. And he said, "Oh, you want to have a chat with that chap over there, Darren? I think he might be very interested in what you do." And still at that point, I had no idea about Darren's history and involvement with the AC. And we only had a 30-second chat at that time, but perhaps a little bit similar to you there, Maxine. He invited me for a longer conversation, which not too long afterwards. And he was very interested in my own backstory and what I was interested in as well. And I think to your points there, he could sort of see potential and he had ideas. And I think one of the things that Darren has always been very good at is making connections and connecting people together and connecting ideas together. And I could see that from the very beginning. And then obviously, as I learned more about him, I realised the significance of his involvement in the AC and what he does. Yeah, I think it was really interesting to me that this idea of the invisible hand, I saw that at work a lot. And as I worked more closely with Darren behind the scenes, I really did see how hard he worked, how much he cared, and how much, how creative he was in terms of making these connections. It really was an art form of his own, putting ideas together. And he really had this wonderful ability to zoom in and out and see the bigger picture and be able to sort of look at ideas in context. And I think it's no coincidence that here we are at 150 episodes talking about Darren. And there's no question in my mind that this whole podcast and this whole series would not exist without him. I mean, he was quite influential. He chose the music. He made that happen. We still use that same music today. And a lot of the ideas in terms of the format, the topics, the themes, the people. So there's so much of Darren through everything we do with this podcast. It really is a legacy of his. What fascinates me is that's just one small aspect of everything he's done, even though, it has the hallmarks of sort of Darren's touch throughout. Right from the very beginning, has been an avid supporter. In fact, I would say it was Darren that instigated the podcast. I think that the more he and I spoke, he felt the AC needed a podcast. I remember him giving me a book. It's a Stephen Covey book called The Eighth Habit. And a lot of people will probably know the 7 Habits book, which is infamous these days in coaching circles and business circles. But the 8th habit is all about discovering your voice and helping others to share theirs. And I remember him giving me that book, and it's fascinating to me, the similarities in terms of his thinking and what this podcast achieves in terms of reaching those worthy aims, or those aims that Darren felt worthy, which is giving a platform and giving a space and a place for people to be able to have really meaningful and important conversations, all of which I know were very important to Darren.
One of the things that I mentioned in our conversation was Stephen Covey, who wrote lots of really fabulous books. But one of the things he wrote about was the 8th habit, which is find your voice and help others to find theirs. And I think that's something that's a real value of the organisation. With the things that we do, we try and support our community to share their voice, their insight, their experience in different ways, whether that's through events, through digital learning, through writing, but also the podcast channel has become a really instrumental and influential way for people to kind of share their voice and to share their insights, and also to, as you would have learned, Maxine, like I did when I was one of the guinea pig hosts. So I had the first go at hosting. Beyond Sue, who'd done a few of the original ones, but the first proper episode. And the reason I was keen to do that was because I knew that I was going to make lots of mistakes, as I always do. And this team would hold those mistakes and we'd learn together. And I think that's been so wonderful to see, is that that sense of continuous improvement, listening to each other, deeply looking to collaborate, has flown through everything that we're doing and everything that's being produced. And the other thing that we always wanted to maintain, because what we wanted to do was we wanted to make sure this was a really professional, high quality product that actually is shared with the audience, and I think we've managed to do that. But back to what I was saying about Stephen Covey's 8th Habit and find your voice and help others to find theirs. I think that's something that I'm really proud to see, and it's great to hear your journey, Maxine. I know there's been a whole bunch of other people that are hosting, whether it's a whole series or hosting a couple of episodes, but they all mention how supportive this team is and how held they feel, and enabled them to kind of learn. It's all those basic things that you forget, but actually this team has put it in place now, and we've learnt what works, and we're able to kind of help and guide people, and I think that's something we can be really proud of.
Again, he's mentioned about finding your voice, and actually bringing me into the AC has helped me find my voice. I'm still on that journey, but my experience of hosting was very powerful for me. I didn't know that I could ask questions and be comfortable with those conversations, but yet I think I've shared how I met Darren and how he approached me. When I think about it, one of the things he saw in me was this curiosity and this learning and this thoughtfulness about life, this thinking about life all the time. So, it makes sense, and it makes sense that I've ended up being part of a podcast which is about voices. It's my kind of law of attraction. So, yeah, it's really special. And again, he's always in that space of wanting us to deeply listen to each other, which he mentions here. And again, collaboration and constant improvement.
He had a wonderful ability to really focus in on the conversation. When you were having a conversation, and I too remember him fishing, many conversations, he was actually, I'd be like, what's that sound in the background? Oh, well, actually, I'm fishing today. He's quite unpredictable in that way, but always talked about family, talked about his kids. I remember him telling me about the time where one of his children, and they were old enough to sit in the front of their car. And I've had this experience now myself. And I remember looking forward to it, where he was just saying he had better conversations with his children when they were able to sort of sit in the front of the car with him. And for me, that says so much about Darren in terms of his relationship to his family and the importance of conversation for him. I think what's particularly special for me in this day and age is I had the pleasure on more than a few occasions to meet Darren in person. We could have so easily not had that opportunity, but I'm really grateful that I had that.
Find your voice and help others to find theirs. That's something that Darren often said. Darren encouraged collaboration, listening to each other, learning from each other, and learning from our mistakes. With his entrepreneurial spirit, Darren made things happen. Actually, with him on board, ideas were not lost on paper. He would encourage quick implementation, offering our teams motivation, support, and an amazing amount of energy that inspired us all. In this next clip, Darren describes the genesis of our podcast channel, just one example of how Darren brought ideas and people together and planted seeds for long-lasting and impactful initiatives.
I think, as always, with most ideas in the AC, they come from lots and lots of different avenues and lots of different people as well. So I think myself and Miranda were definitely there at the beginning, joined quickly by Miranda and Wendy. But actually, before that as well, the sort of genesis of me becoming more aware of podcasts was, I happened upon Rob. I was sat behind a camera in London filming an event, and Rob and I connected a long time ago now, probably 6 or 7 years ago, maybe even 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know. It was a long time ago. And, that was probably one of the early stages of where sort of podcast and the potential of podcast started to come into my orbit of awareness. And it was actually Rob that helped me to start thinking about it, if I'm really honest. And then Smiranda was doing some work with Sue and others, so they were capturing podcasts or just capturing audio captures of various different interviews that we did, and they were going down relatively well and being successful. And I think we just started to realise that there was a potential for the coaching profession to have a voice and to create a space for voices. And as we all know, I think the AC is a really wonderful and eclectic community that's in 80, 90 odd plus countries. It's probably even more than that now. And we wanted to capture people's stories. We wanted to capture people's ideas and stories, and give them a format and a structure within which they could be celebrated, really. And as has been said at the very beginning, it's fantastic that we're already at 100th, and we're probably on our way. We're probably not there yet, but towards 100,000 listeners as well, or listens, which is really fantastic. So it's something I think this team collectively and all of the people that have supported us can be really proud of.
I'm thinking about him connecting people as a team, how well we all gel. And I don't necessarily think that's an accident. He probably wouldn't have. I joined this team. We've all got similar ways of thinking. We're quite open. We like to dig and dive into some deep stuff. Sometimes, we've got different ways of working that work well. So I think even just on this small little team of ours, he's done a good job there of connecting us all up as well, and I'm very grateful for that. So. Yeah, that goodness knows how many ripples that goes out to just with that connecting thing that he did.
It's been a huge amount of fun to be involved in it and to get it going, and also just to really watch the professionalism that's been built into it as we go forward. I think as we'll capture some of the stories, I think there's lots that we can all be really proud of. I know with myself, Rob and Smiranda, we've often talked about the fact that this voice that we're creating, this collective voice around AC podcasts, is going to reverberate beyond our lifetime, which I think is so exciting. When you're creating a piece of content that actually is someone's story or someone's insight, and that is probably going to be there longer than they're going to be on this planet, I think there's something very special to that. So I think that we know that we're creating sound ripples that will go out for generations, and I think that's something that we can all be really, really proud of. And I think there's a timeliness to the stories that we're capturing as well. I mean, some of the things are in the moment, in that time, but quite a lot of what we're talking about and what's been captured so far are, they're truths, they're things that are so important, they're core principles that actually people need to carry through their professional life, through their personal life. So hopefully people find little pearls of wisdom in all the various different stories and people that we're interviewing.
I think it's a question of how the whole atmosphere is created. Yes. So working with Darren, and in a sense, the way we are then now working with the digital learning team, with the podcast team, it is about being connected. It's about working together and not focusing only. I mean, obviously we're focusing on the work, but we're connecting at the human level as well. So we feel like we are part of something together. We're just giving so much more of ourselves to it, and we can rely on each other, and it's not a corporate style of teamwork that people are creating this environment, but it is we're ourselves here, and that's how I felt with Darren always. I could be myself. I could talk about my family, and I could talk about the situation I'm in, and I could talk about work, and I could talk like there was the wholeness of it all. Yes, it was not just being in that context in which you're saying, okay, focus is here and that's it. And there's, I'm not going to show up as a person. I'm just going to do my work bit because that's what we are here for. So that connection is very important. And for very many of the things that we're going to discuss about today, and we'll listen to Darren himself speak, my feeling is that Darren kind of lives through all of these because his legacy is very present. We're speaking about the planting seeds, and we're speaking about the invisible hand, and we're speaking about the connecting people and vision, and all of these things would characterize Darren in so many ways, because there's hundreds of examples that we could give from our experience and the experience of those other people that we know whom he interacted with. And there are hundreds of people that we don't know that he interacted and he interacted with them. So, but that's all of that almost describes Darren and his role and how his impact on others. And I dare to say that we kind of live in that way. We continue living in that way without thinking about it. And that's what I'm feeling. It's his legacy in this context. He has many other bits that he can call legacy, but it all lives through us, through the work that we are doing. A lot of the things that he's sharing, I am looking at it now. So it's been a couple of years since those recordings, and we're doing all those things. It's like I'm not even connecting the dots, but it was there. It was those seeds were planted, and then we kept on going with them, and now there are all these beautiful trees that we have left and right. Yes, because we are already 2 years down the line. We've implemented a lot of those things. So it all carries on.
I love hearing different people's voices, and I mean both the host as their experience develops and you hear the confidence grow and you hear them just get used to the kind of audio farts that you sometimes do, the mistakes you make, and you actually just surface on. You don't make a big thing of it anymore. You just crack on with it. I love the fact that we're on this podcast and there we are with Miranda's new baby daughter, which is just brilliant. And I think there's a humanity to that and a humility to that I think is really wonderful. And I love that. And I love hearing that exploration and that journey from the hosts and then also the guests. You know, you can really hear as guests start to warm up, as the host gets them into a comfortable place, finding people's voices, holding a really high professional standards, and we continue to seek to raise that bar. I think that's something we can all be really proud of. But yeah, I'm loving listening to the stories from different people. We really do want people that just have a fantastic idea to show up, knock on our door, come and connect with any one of the team, and come and share with us what you'd love to make happen. Because the great thing about this is this team it's a bit like when you're seeing your small children learning to ride a bike. There they are with their stabilizers on, and you start with the stabilizers, or you start with the balance bikes, whichever your philosophy is. We started with stabilizers, but very quickly you take those stabilizers off, and there you are finding yourself running behind them, down a hill, typically in a park, and next thing you know, you've let them go and off they fly, and hopefully they break at the end. But that's what this team is so fabulous at doing, is supporting people that have never experienced being a host of a podcast, or even maybe of conducting interviews in an audio fashion. And this team is brilliant at supporting people to do that. And a whole bunch of people that have been hosts on the AC one have then gone on to kind of create their own channel, or to be guests on other people's podcasts as a host, or as to be interviewed. So I think that's a really important point, is that the richness of this, and the wonderful thing for this team is we don't know what we don't know. Someone will come out from the the global orbit, and they'll come to us and say, I've got this idea for X, could I have a go at it? And this team is very likely to say yes. Let's schedule it in and let's find a way to have a go with it and sort of play with it and explore with it. So I think that's a really important point, and it's great, Maxine, that you're able to share your experiences and how supportive and supported you've felt, because that is something that we really do want. We want more people to come forward. We've also had hosts from Australia, haven't we, Miranda? That's another series of guests, and hosts have come from Australia as well, which is fantastic. So, what we're excited about is how can we support diverse voices, how can we support people from all different parts of the world. The fact that we're also going to be able to do it in different languages is fantastic, but that diversity of voice and supporting people on their journey to give them a bit of support as they step forwards is something this team's really good at. And so I think it's something we're really proud of, and that we can rejoice and hopefully we'll do more of as we go forwards.
Yeah, Darren talking about the support that we give hosts in the podcast, the support that I got when I first started, and now I get to enjoy being part of that support. And there are, a lot of off-mic meetings and conversations that we have with hosts, particularly for myself and for you, Rob, sometimes that we have conversations with hosts where we kind of coach them, and which is quite special, really, that we're kind of actually coaching people about a coaching podcast, watching them grow, building their confidence, helping them relax into the role. It is part of the best part of the job for me, because like Darren, and I think that's the same for all the people that he's found in this podcast team, for you, Rob, for myself, for Miranda, we love watching people grow. We love giving people a voice too. In this clip, Darren talks about the maturation of coaching and his reflections on that.
Yeah, well, I think this is sort of the edge of my own thinking, and it's something we explored. There's so much insight and so many pearls of wisdom in these interviews, and it's how can we encapsulate those and capture those in a way that make them meaningful. So that's something that we as a team are thinking about. What could we do to visualize some of those things, or to actually capture them in a way so that people can kind of take that insight, not just from the stories, but also from maybe stories that you haven't heard. Because the thing about the different series that we do is that they really do go into some depth. They go off in different angles of those depths as well. So that's something that we love as a collective team. But yeah, I'd love to find a way to codify the insight and wisdom in a way that is consistently codified, not just in the audio, but find another way. So don't know what that is at the moment, but that's a sort of an edge of our own learning here as a team, which I think is quite exciting. It's what can we do to support the codification of insight, knowledge, wisdom, stories, so that it becomes meaningful. Miranda, I think, was saying about the fact that it's actionable insight, it's practical, it's real tips and tools that people can kind of take away with them. And I think that that's something that we'll always want to kind of ensure is weaved into this podcast going forwards as well.
Yeah, I think what came over in that clip as well is the deeper level of what this podcast is about, really, the broader context that it sits in, and the broader context that coaching sits in, about, like he said, how do we support the consciousness? Coaching is meant to be all about creating change. And it started off many years ago as being very, very good sort of goal setting, but it's gone a lot deeper than that, because the world has gone a lot deeper than that. And so it is very fascinating what he talks about, the maturation of coaching. What does it mean to be a coach going forward? I think it's a really important thing that he says there, and something that as people listen to this podcast can really think about again for themselves. He's right. I think we need to think about our contribution as human beings, whether we're coaches or not. There's a specific level that coaches come into, and the best coaches, and I think the only way to be a good coach is actually about your own self-reflection, your own self-growth, and your own contribution, whether it's through your contribution through one-to-one with coaching, or in groups, or in the wider context of some of those difficult conversations that Darren and you guys were talking about in this Reflections podcast. I think we do need to think about our contribution as individuals, as coaches, but also in a wider context, our wider contribution to the world, and that involves how we grow ourselves as much as how we help others grow as coaches. So it is very important, and it is a very good question that he asks there. My thought here was that how much Darren has contributed to that maturation of coaching, how his deeper level of thinking has impacted others, and has impacted the world of coaching in a broader sense. His involvement with the AC, the creation of the MOE Foundation, which is where I did my coach training. All those elements are him kind of living that truth, not seeing coaching as a static thing, but seeing as an ever-growing thing, and therefore having an ever-growing impact and contribution to the world.
Well, I think it's so funny that, the phrase democratizing coaching, I did a TEDx and said about democratizing coaching about 8-9 years ago. Some people have a real issue with that phrase. It's really funny. It just makes me laugh. That's why I was sort of sitting there smiling. From an AC perspective, as I said at the very beginning, it's a community. And the beauty of that community is it's an open community. The AC has always had an open approach. It flows through everything that we do. From our accreditation is open, so we accept training and people's training from all sorts of different schools of thoughts, all sorts of different professional bodies, and we are the only organisation that takes that open approach, whereas others have got a more closed or pyramid type of style. The way that we draw the organisation is always in sort of circles, that sense of we are in it together and we are collaborative. We don't always get that right. I mean, as in any organisation, not everything there are elements of not hierarchy, but where different decision gets made by different groups. But as much as possible, we do try to ensure that it's a really genuinely collaborative organisation, and especially when it comes to our community. It's like we want to support our community. We are, after all, the Association for Coaching at its genesis was created for the benefit of coaches via coaches. That was the genesis of this organisation back in 2002, and we've never forgotten that, and I don't think we'll ever forget that. I think that's the humility that needs to always be part of this. And the beauty is that, we've seen at the explosion of coaching, it was always going to happen, but it's just, especially during COVID, the number of people that have discovered coaching and the power of coaching and how it's useful and can support them, especially as we've seen, mental health challenges for people in lockdown and things like that. I saw a report just 2 days ago about the fact that there just aren't enough counsellors in the world, and a lot of coaches have actually emerged to support people to create an open space. And that doesn't mean just as a one-to-one, it means as a community and as groups, as subgroups, in these sort of coaching circles that have been set up. And I think, that's what's really important for us as a community. And the other thing is just to say, coaching is always going to evolve. What we're talking about here in 22, it'll be interesting to see what we're talking about in 2032, 2042, and what does coaching and the profession of coaching look like at that point in time. I don't know. And the way that we'll discover that is by listening to people, allowing those people that are out there on the edge of society or on the edge of coaching and the edge of the profession to bring their ideas and their ideals and bring their community into and share their stories with this community. That's how change happens, I think. Yeah, you get stuff at the core, but actually it's at the edges, and that's why we're always excited to support people who aren't the known voices, who are the quiet voices, the hidden voices. We all know through our coach training and leadership training, you're trained to watch out for the introverts, you're trained to look out for the quiet voices, because quite often when they're sitting in a room, they might be sitting there on something very, very insightful. And so definitely from this team's perspective and from this channel's perspective, we really do celebrate those quiet voices and want to support those quiet voices and celebrate those people that have got something different and alternative to bring, even if it means it's challenging us as a professional community or as a professional body. We're open, we want that challenge. The conversations about diversity and inclusion, as I sat and listened to some of those, I found them really challenging on some levels, on a personal level. As I listened to our podcast on a Monday evening when I drive an hour to go to football, and I love listening to our podcast as I do my drive there. I'm sitting in my car, on the M25, and I'm listening and I'm being challenged, and it wasn't comfortable. At times that's not comfortable, and it shouldn't be. And I think that's really important for us as well, is never shy away from the difficult conversations, the tough subjects, the hard subjects. I think the more that we can encourage that, and the more that we can bring a diversity of voices to it that help us to look in the mirror and to challenge ourselves individually and collectively as a community, then that's a fantastic thing. And I think, the more that we can do this on this podcast channel, the more it will then flow through to Smiranda's point about the fact that people that come on this channel then flow into different areas to teach people different things and to support people with their CPD. So I think that's something that we really want to celebrate, and we want to continue going forward. So anyone who's out there who's got a burning idea or a passion or something they really would love to kind of shine a light on, and have got a small community or don't have a community, because that's the other thing about the AC is if you don't have a community, we do have a community. So we can help you go and find people that might be interested in the subject that you want to speak. And that's another part of what this community is about. It's about stitching people from different parts of the world who wouldn't ordinarily connect and collide. We can help you to make that happen, and we can help you find people that think like you or think alternatively from you as well. That's something that I think should be celebrated, and we should be ensuring that we consistently keep bringing that to this platform and this channel.
It's amazing what Darren can say in a few minutes, I would say, to this clip. He says so much in a short amount of time. And he did say a lot, and he said some very profound things in a short amount of time when you were in a conversation with him. And I think that reflects him. You know, he runs through these different topics in a few minutes, being authentic as yourself as a coach. He talks about the uncomfortable truths that we're discussing in the podcast and how that made him feel and why that's important in coaching. He talks about the responsibility we have in coaching, the democratization of coaching. He goes through so many topics in a few minutes. And for me, that really reflects him. But what captured me particularly was his statement about coaching being an art form and a science. And that's really lovely, because I think it is an art form. It's creative thinking, and some people were using creative techniques all the time. And it is a science. It is scientifically based. A lot of people now are learning about neuroscience. And I think he would possibly agree with me that it's also about spiritual growth, which is our deeper levels of growth. So, yeah, but it's just funny to hear how much he says in such a short amount of time, how many truths he shares in such a short amount of time. This is what it was like talking with him. You know, his brain, his heart is going off in so many directions. He had a very broad view of everything. He was a bit of an eagle, really. He could see the broader perspective. He could look to the future, but he could also look down and see the details and those small things that mattered. And in some ways, this clip kind of demonstrates that.
That is something that we really do want. We want more people to come forward. We've also had hosts from Australia, haven't we, Smiranda? That's another series of guests, and hosts have come from Australia as well, which is fantastic. So, you know, what we're excited about is how can we support diverse voices, how can we support people from all different parts of the world. The fact that we're also going to be able to do it in different languages is fantastic. But that diversity of voice and supporting people on their journey to give them a bit of support as they step forwards is something this team's really good at. And so I think it's something we're really proud of and that we can rejoice and hopefully we'll do more of as we go forwards.
Another special occasion I shared with Darren on the podcast was episode 69 with George Warren, Sue Stockdale and Dr. Alex Morgan. And in that episode, we were reflecting on the series so far and our experiences as hosts, but also what we had learned, not just as hosts, but also as coaches, interviewing various guests on a variety of topics. And for me, it was a really insightful and useful experience, but also just a really pleasurable experience to share that space with Darren, to listen to his thoughts and reflections. So here are some clips from episode 69. And this first clip is Darren setting the frame for our panel conversation.
Well, thank you all. It's really interesting, as Sue shared, she was really the sort of pioneer for us with the podcast series, along with Rob, who sort of joined the team and said, have you considered giving podcasts a shot as the Association for Coaching? And it's been a real investment from the organisation and a labour of love from the team. And I'll get into the team sort of towards the end to thank them because they've done such a fabulous job. And, what was so wonderful when we set off on this journey, what we wanted to do was amplify the AC community's voice, engaging meaningful, rich and diverse conversations, and then hopefully provide actionable insights. And as I was reflecting today, and I've got a page in front of me here, as I'm sure my peers have got, is just the eclectic mix of both people that we've interviewed, but also the subject areas is just something that I'm, on a personal and professional level, as somebody who's part of the Association for Coaching, but also just as somebody who loves the profession, I'm so proud of the work that has been co-created by everyone that's on this call and all the teams and the guests that we've been very fortunate to interview. And the subjects just are such a wonderful array and an eclectic mix. And, later on, we'll get into the future of coaching and potentially the future of this podcast. And I'm personally really excited to see where 2022 and 2023 goes for us, because if this last year or so is anything to go by, I think it's going to be really wonderful.
Darren was always up to speed with the latest trends and kept bringing the bigger picture of what impacts the coaching profession and what coaches should focus on to stay relevant and impactful. He loved immersing himself in data, analyzing trends, and sharing what we could or should focus on next. He was, as he liked describing himself, the invisible hand, and there are hundreds of testimonies from people he impacted and whose lives and work are better thanks to Darren's influence.
I've just been doing a sort of a global listening tour on behalf of the Association for Coaching, and I was looking for megatrends. So what were some of the big contextual trends that people are seeing? Climate obviously came out, global leadership came out, inequality in all its guises came out, next generation young people, mental health, and then AI, tech and digital disruption. So it's going to be interesting, I think, this conversation, because as I was reflecting on the various different series, it seems like we've naturally started to pick up on some of those trends. And I think what you're talking to is a really important area of deeper conversation and deeper collaborative conversation, both on an individual basis, a collective basis, a community basis, but also as professional bodies and the organisations that are part of this. I think it's a huge area, and I think there's a number of huge areas that we're going to be picking up. I wanted to reinforce that the recent piece of work that I've done on behalf of the AC suggests absolutely that this is a trend, and this is something that's really serious and important for us to explore.
There's just lots of phrases listening to Darren here that I hear him use a lot. Have a voice, the idea of community. You know, he was so passionate about the AC community, and community is one of the kind of USPs in a way of the AC. And I think having him as one of the founders of the AC, he really has brought that into the AC. I think it's something in the AC that really represents Darren and what he believed in. So yeah, it's nice to hear him talking about that. And this idea of capturing things, this was, again, part of his language that he used constantly, capturing, celebrating, community, and having fun with all this. But another key thing he mentioned in that clip was beyond our lifetime. He was always thinking about that. He was always thinking about the future and the impact that he and others were having on the near future, but also the distant future, the next generations and the generations after that. That's always the way he thought. Yeah, so that was, a really important part of him. And what's touching about that, of course, is that he has done that he has left this legacy behind him.
Having spent a lot of time working with Darren in the background on the podcast, I was really excited to listen to his reflections in episode 69 on his own series for the AC, the Health and Wellbeing series, which was a wonderful series where we got to hear Darren interviewing some new guests, but some old-time friends of his too, in great depth about their views and perspectives on health and well-being.
I did the Health and Wellbeing series. I think the piece that a number of you have picked up on around optimism and active hope, I think, is also really important. I think it's really important because we are talking about huge, quite scary subject areas at times. And, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to do next year is actually look at how we get more scientific-based people to come into the podcast series and actually break down some of the technicalities of some of these big challenges in even more detail, and not just individually, but actually maybe in group conversations as well. But I think one of the other things that from the AC team perspective that we've realised, and Rob's been so fantastic at being a brilliant mentor to all of us, I think, on this journey. I personally grew a huge amount and learnt a lot from Rob, as well as all the other things that he offers out to the AC. But one of the things that the team have acknowledged is actually watching us all grow as hosts, seeing us all grow as hosts.
The language that he uses about everything and about others is actually what he lived. That he had a lot of integrity in that way, that he lived these very words that he talks about were very much part of him, and he lived that very truthfully. So I think what I'm picking up from all these clips is his enthusiasm. You can hear his energy in the way he speaks, and it's very moving to hear his voice again and to miss that, listening to him. It is emotional having to listen to these clips again.
And I think for me, Darren's perspective on podcasts was really inspirational. Seeing podcasts or the act of podcasting or being a podcast host, as well as being a coach or someone interested in coaching, as an opportunity for not just personal growth, but also professional growth too. And the opportunity to share those conversations and help others to professionally grow and enjoy that journey and learn from each other. And our journey on the podcast or podcasting together for the AC wasn't without some fun and banter between us, as well as enjoying that growth journey, the highs and the lows and some of the challenges between us. But we learnt a tremendous amount from each other. And I think for me, that was really something that Darren instilled for all of us.
Yeah, and trust you to take the sort of line and angle that I was going to go down, Rob, so to bring a bit of playfulness and fun into it. Yeah, no, I think Alex, you mentioned pride, and I, you know, my sense with my own series was that sense of proudness and pride, and I also just really I learned to just go with the flow. Just allow the space. You know, I tried to at first manufacture and structure it, and you know, what are the areas that we're going to talk about? You know, a bit like some of this prep, we were initially putting out some potential structure just to give that sense of pretend safety, when it's not really needed. Actually, in the vulnerability, the immersion and emergence actually is where the juice really flows. And from my perspective, I think we're probably heading to about 40-odd thousand listeners on this podcast series now, which is phenomenal, which is wonderful. But yeah, absolutely. Let's look out 10 years from now. Let's look out 50 years from now. Where will that be? And this body of work will be there. And it's really interesting as I look back through all the different areas that we've all covered. I always see like album covers, and I see the person and their subject, and it's like album covers. And it really is like a body of work to me personally that we've all been co-creators of. And it's such a wonderful gift to the world, and it'll be wonderful to see in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, if it stands the test of time, and also how our own thinking evolves or how our own ideas evolve. I think that's the other beauty from a personal perspective, as well as the wider professional ripples as you're talking about there, Rob, in terms of longer term time and space. But I think that vulnerability is really important, and I think it's really important to say anyone that's listening to this, from what I've heard, everyone saying, jump in, let us know. If you really would love to be a host, you've got a subject area that you think is really important that you'd like to be part of, we'd love to hear from you. So please do reach out to the team, because one of the things that we want is diversity of hosts as well. That's part of the joy of this. So what else? What else is sort of, I'm going to stop following the script that I've got here. So what else is bubbling up for people? What's a question that any of you've got at the moment, or a sort of subject area that you want to pick up with in this conversation?
Stop following the script. Darren, for me, was somebody who was exceptionally curious, always eager to learn something new and always ready to have a deeper conversation with someone. He had a style which on the surface appeared as though he was challenging the everyday norms and bending the rules and the boundaries. And that was something for me that was evident throughout everything he did. It always came across for me as pioneering, innovative, and above all, he was a great listener. I think this reflective clip from episode 69 is a great example of how Darren was not just great at asking questions, but always asking others for their questions and also being a great and supportive listener.
I'll just give you a sort of a summary of what I've heard from the interviews that I've done. So there's this real sense around how do we support the consciousness and awareness raising in society. So it's it's very much big picture. Then it drills down into sort of practical and pragmatic details. So that's one of the areas. Another area that really did emerge was around maturation of coaching. And what does it mean to be a coach moving forwards? And one of the very pragmatic, bringing it Sue's point around bringing it down to the nuts and bolts, the kind of pragmatics. One of the things that was really interesting was people talking about their own maturation process of becoming a professional, being the best coach they can be, but to be the best person they can be ultimately. And in that moment, actually, when they're with clients, they want to be able to share, actually, I really care about injustices in the world, or I really care about contribution, or I really care about climate. I want to be able to share my true voice in this experience. And some people felt a level of resistance to that. And because of some of the parables, the rules, the beliefs, the identity that we have as coaches, they feel like they're really challenging some of those, almost like golden rules. And then there's other people that are been in a coach for a very long time and actually have worked in multiple different ways. And what they were saying was that actually my client wants me to bring my entire self, my entire orbit of knowledge and wisdom into this conversation right here, right now. And I thought that was really fascinating. That there was, as always with these things, there's different people at different places, but it was fascinating to kind of hear that, and it feels to me like that's part of where we are as an organisation and as a profession. At the moment is what does it mean to be a great coach? And actually, I always remember Sir John Whitmore used to say, and Sue will remember this, he used to say, when we stop talking about coaching and coaches, then we've done our job. So that's always in my mind. His voice always comes in my mind when I think about coaching maturity and my own personal sort of journey to mastery and whatever that means for me in whatever terms. So those are some of the things that people were talking to me about. And just to share with you, when I went on to those conversations, I didn't offer anything. I just asked questions and sat back and captured the notes, moved on to the next question. It was very much an open space approach.
Darren was one of the most genuine and truthful people I have ever met. He didn't shy away from difficult conversations. He always spoke his mind and pushed everyone around him to do better, be better, and live up to their dreams. He actually had this unique way of connecting with people and having deep conversations from which ideas and projects would simply emerge. He saw in people more than they saw in themselves and knew how to challenge and encourage us to be extraordinary. His drive and energy will be missed in everything that we do. Here's Darren speaking again about being real, being yourself, and embracing your authentic self. He dared to say things as they are and share uncomfortable truths, challenging us to look deeper into the AC and the coaching profession's role in our society today.
Yes, there's a really important series of messages in there about being very real, being yourself, being true to yourself, your authentic self. It's going out there and working with people, helping them to be authentic and honest. And just to sort of share, it's my own personal journey with that. And Alex, some of the things you've shared really resonate with me about, I've fallen out of love with my own coaching experience, at times, not the profession, but my own relationship to it and how much the potential of it, because sometimes I've seen behaviours that I just feel are at odds with the philosophy that sits and underpins coaching. So that really sort of resonates with me, and then you have to come back to it and sort of reassess yourself and say, well, actually, how do I, enact that? I'm part of the system. What do I need to do? And I think also, that report that I wrote, it wasn't comfortable to share some uncomfortable truths. So with my peers and with our internal Association for Coaching team as well, that was not always easy to sort of share. It wasn't my voice; it was the collective voice. I think that's the other thing, and I think that's a really important place and a role that as coaches we can play. George, you just mentioned there Greek. Absolutely. Go back to the witness and being a witness. It goes right back to past great writers and thinkers. And our role as a witness is so vital, I think, in the coaching profession. Some of the parables of life. The emperor's new clothes. Actually, you're naked right now. We're naked as human species. Humankind is naked, and I think we have a responsibility, and we have the opportunity to support that conversation. And we're not about being right. It's not about being. It's about saying, let's share our own experience and our own thinking. At times in this past year, I found it very difficult to read some of the literature and research that I was doing, around climate, and listening to some of the conversations, George, that you were party to. Alex, I'm finding some of the conversations you're in at the moment very, very difficult to listen to, and I have to stop, come back to them, rewind it and listen again and go, actually, that's really quite challenging and tough. So I'm really excited personally, go back to that piece about hope. I'm really excited as we look out to the future and the profession and this podcast series and what the AC can do and what the professional bodies can do, about how can we engage in a richer collaborative conversation to discuss some of these topics that we five right now are having, in a very honest and candid way, and not about being right, but about saying, this isn't my expression of truth right now in this moment. Now, tomorrow it might be different, but I need to share that right now. And I think that's going to be quite fascinating. How can we use this podcast system to kind of enact some of those conversations? So I think maturity is a really big one. What else? What else is a sort of another area? As you look out to the future and you look out 2022, 2025, 2030, and you imagine the way the direction the world is travelling and humanity and humankind is travelling, and then right down to our profession, how our profession is emerging. And just to give you another trend that was shared in the report was around, people were saying, some people don't like the phrase democratising the coaching. I did a TEDx 8-9 years ago now, and I used that phrase, democratising the coaching. And what I personally meant was, how do we take coaching into spaces that it's not ordinarily found? And I know a whole bunch of us on here offer that and support various different initiatives, which is really exciting. And one of the trends that came out was actually, how do we as a profession support spaces where coaching is not easily available, and take money off the table in lots of ways. Actually, where people in Kenya, Uganda, Africa, Madagascar, how could we take this wonderful art form and science that is the profession of coaching and take it into harder to reach areas? So that's a subject area that I'm personally really passionate about, and we'll look to support the AC with next year, and how can we actually start to put some projects in place to actually support in those areas. But what else? What else is really meaningful to you? As you look out to the future, what would you love to see us do more of? What would you love to what conversations would you love to see and hear?
As many of you who know Darren and who worked with him, you would know that Darren wasn't interested in quick fixes. He always spoke of the legacy we must leave for future generations. And hey, what a legacy Darren left behind. One that lives through all the people he impacted, mentored, supported and loved. His generous vision lives on in the AC and in MOE, the charity he founded to honor the memory of his mother. Darren was brave, kind, funny, truthful to himself and others, and always ready to help and support everyone. He was a visionary and a true leader. He created a safe space for us all. If Darren was in the room, you knew everyone's voice mattered, and it was safe to speak your mind. It is a great loss that he is no longer with us. He made the world better for everyone, and we will forever miss him. Darren's vision, inspiration, and legacy will live through all the people he touched. Thank you, Darren, for everything you've taught us. Your advice, your voice, and inspiration will keep guiding us as we continue on this journey. You've always listened to all the podcasts we produce, so I hope you will listen to this one too, on whatever frequency you're on up there. So grateful to have met, worked with, and been mentored by this wonderful human being. Maxine, Rob, any final thoughts?
It's just no lie to say that Darren really was an awesome human being. And I feel very lucky that he approached me, very humbled by that approach. I really appreciate what he saw in me that I didn't see in myself that day, and what I'm now leaning into more and more. And that's thanks to him and some other teachers in my life in the last number of years. He reminds us all to be ever curious about ourselves, to be ever curious about life, to be reaching into finding solutions no matter how difficult things get, to be brave enough to have those difficult conversations, but to do it with love. That's something that in the last few times I spoke to him, he talked about was love. That was the core of his mum's belief in life, and the thing that she inspired in him to pursue. And he took that forward. And so in any conversation, whether he agreed or disagreed with you, he brought that there as well. There was never a sense of judgment. I'm not saying he may not have gone off privately and had a rant and a rave about some things that said, and he didn't have his frustrations. He did. He was human. He wasn't perfect. He probably would say far from it. But he did have these qualities that touched us all and helped us believe in ourselves. So with listening to this podcast, I guess it really does demonstrate the legacy that he's leaving just by these short few clips. Just by the conversation we're having, we're just demonstrating a small amount of the ripple and the legacy that he's left. And as I said earlier, wherever he is, I hope he knows and is starting to learn the legacy he's left behind, which I believe will go on for decades and beyond. And also the podcasts that we've made, the things that he said that had a timelessness to them, all the other things he did in his life, things that he recorded, the things that he said to people will continue on. And so I think that's an encouragement for all of us to know that we have impact and that we can have a greater impact. And the more authentic and real and honest and candid we get in that space, the more courage we have, we can do that. And in this world as it is right now, it's needed. And Darren is just an example of how one human being can have such an impact, but that he actually would say, and probably agree with me, that he wasn't special, in that we can all do this exactly the same thing and all have as much impact on changing this world. And even though he's not with us, he definitely is behind us in that task. So thank you, Darren, just for being you and for everything you brought to the AC and you brought to me personally.
For me, it's one of those rare occasions where I perhaps don't have quite so many words to share, other than I agree with Maxine on everything, except for I do believe he was special. And I know what you're saying, Maxine, in the sense that Darren was very down to earth, but he did have some very unique talents. And what I felt was special about him is, to your point there, Maxine, is that he could teach us all how to be more courageous in everything we do, whether that's podcasting, coaching, or whatever amazing stuff it is that we're all destined to do. I'll miss him. I'll certainly miss our conversations. And I'm just really grateful for our conversation today, and really grateful that we've had the conversations that we did have and we were able to hit the record button. It's really special to hear his voice again. For me, thanks, Darren, for being such a great mentor, coach, and friend.
It's been a pleasure to be with you today, Maxine and Rob. Thank you for listening to us pay tribute to our colleague and friend. We added several links to articles and videos with or about Darren and to the podcast mentioned above in this episode. And now we will end with thanks from Darren himself with this final clip.
Rob, Miranda and Wendy were part of the initial team that along with myself, we really helped to kind of craft the system that sits behind this in the background. And there's lots of other people that now play a role and have been really instrumental in supporting that. So I want to say heartfelt thanks to that. I want to say thanks to the AC leadership team as well for committing to this and investing in this, because it was an investment of not just money, but also time and resource. And I think it's paying dividends and showing that. And I can't wait to see the amplification of that. I also want to say thanks to the guests and also to all the audience members that kind of click in and listen to us and not listen to us, but actually listen to the wonderful guests that we get onto it. So I think that's where I wanted to kind of summarise and say it's been wonderful to be part of this. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you all so much, for being part of this exploration and journey that we've been on.